but to continue the history of the first walking delegate, if you are interested. I am interested myself because I have seen his relics in Sackingen, and also the very spot where he worked his great miracle, the one which won him his sainthood in the papal court a few centuries later. To have seen these things makes me feel very near to him, almost like a member of the family, in fact. While wandering about the continent, he arrived at the spot on the Rhine which is now occupied by Sackingen, and proposed to settle there, but the people warned him off. He appealed to the king of the Franks, who made him a present of the whole region, people and all. He built a great cloister there for women, and proceeded to teach in it and accumulate more land. There were two wealthy brothers in the neighborhood, Urso and Landulf. Urso died and Fridolin claimed his estates. Landulf asked for documents and papers. Fridolin had none to show. He said the bequest had been made to him by word of mouth. Landulf suggested that he produce a witness, and said it in a way which he thought was very witty, very sarcastic. This shows that he did not know the walking delegate. Fridolin was not disturbed, he said. "Appoint your court, I will bring a witness." The court thus created consisted of 15 counts and barons. A day was appointed for the trial of the case. On that day the judges took their seats in state, and proclamation was made that the court was ready for business. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes passed, and yet no Fridolin appeared. Landulf rose, and was in the act of claiming judgment by default when a strange clacking sound was heard coming up the stairs. In another moment, Fridolin entered at the door and came walking in a deep hush down the middle aisle, with a tall skeleton stalking in his rear. Amazement and terror sat upon every countenance, for everybody suspected that the skeleton was Urso's. It stopped before the chief judge and raised its bony arm aloft and began to speak, while all the assembly shuddered, for they could see the words leak out between its ribs. It said, "Brother, why dost thou disturb my blessed rest, and withhold by robbery the gift which I gave thee for the honor of God?" It seems a strange thing and most irregular, but the verdict was actually given against Landulf, on the testimony of this wandering rack heap of unidentified bones. In our day, a skeleton would not be allowed to testify at all, for a skeleton has no moral responsibility, and its word could not be believed on oath, and this was probably one of them. Most skeletons are not to be believed on oath, and this was probably one of them. However, the incident is valuable as preserving to us a curious sample of the quaint laws of evidence of that remote time, a time so remote, so far back toward the beginning of original idiocy, that the difference between a bench of judges and a basket of vegetables was as yet so slight that we may say with all confidence that it didn't really exist. During several afternoons, I have been engaged in an interesting, maybe useful piece of work. That is to say, I have been trying to make the mighty Jungfrau earn her living, earn it in a most humble sphere, but on a prodigious scale of necessity, for she couldn't do anything in a small way. With her size and style, I have been trying to make her do service on a stupendous dial, and check off the hours as they glide along her pallid face up there against the sky, and tell the time of day to the populations lying within 50 miles of her, and to the people in the moon, if they have a good telescope there. Until late in the afternoon, the Jungfrau's aspect is that of a spotless desert of snow set upon edge against the sky. But by mid-afternoon, some elevations which rise out of the western border of the desert, whose presence you perhaps had not detected or suspected up to that time, began to cast black shadows eastward across the gleaming surface. At first, there is only one shadow. Later, there are two. 2 p.m. the other day, I was gazing and worshipping as usual, when I chanced to notice that shadow number 1 was beginning to take itself something of the shape of the human profile. By 4, the back of the head was good, the military cap was pretty good, the nose was bold and strong, the upper lip sharp, but not pretty, and there was a great goatee that shot straight aggressively forward from the chin. At 4:30, the nose had changed its shape considerably, and the altered slant of the sun had revealed and made conspicuous a huge buttress or barrier of naked rock, which was so located as to answer very well for a shoulder or coat collar to this swarthy and indiscreet sweetheart, who had stolen out there right before everybody to pillow his head on the Virgin's white breast and whisper soft sentimentalities to her in the sensuous music of the crashing ice domes and the boom and thunder of the passing avalanche, music very familiar to his ear, for he has heard it every afternoon at this hour since the day he first came courting this child of the earth, who lives in the sky, and that day is far, yes, for he was at this pleasant sport before the Middle Ages drifted. By him in the valley, before the Romans marched past, and before the antique and recordless barbarians fished and hunted here and wondered who he might be, and were probably afraid of him, and before primeval man himself, just emerged from his four-footed estate, stepped out upon this plain, first sample of his race, 1,000 centuries ago, and cast a glad eye up there, judging he had found a brother human being and consequently something to kill, and before the big saurians wallowed here, still some eons earlier. Oh yes, a day so far back that the eternal sun was present to see that first visit. A day so far back that neither tradition nor history was born yet, and a whole weary eternity must come and go before the restless little creature, of whose face this stupendous shadow face was the prophecy, would arrive in the earth and begin his shabby career, and think it a big thing. Oh, indeed yes. When you talk about your poor Roman and Egyptian day before yesterday antiquities, you should choose a time when the hoary shadow face of the Jungfrau is not by. It antedates all antiquities known or imaginable, for it was here the world itself created the theater of future antiquities. And it is the only witness with a human face that was there to see the marvel, and remains to us a memorial of it. By 4:40 p.m. the nose of the shadow is perfect and is beautiful. It is black and is powerfully marked against the upright canvas of glowing snow, and covers hundreds of acres of that resplendent surface. Meantime shadow number 2 has been creeping out well to the rear of the face west of it, and at 5 o'clock has assumed a shape that has rather a poor and rude semblance of a shoe. Meantime, also, the great shadow face has been gradually changing for 20 minutes, and now, 5 p.m., it is becoming a quite fair portrait of Roscoe Conkling. The likeness is there and is unmistakable. The goatee is shortened now and has an end. Formerly it hadn't any, but ran off eastward and arrived nowhere. By 6 p.m., the face has dissolved and gone, and the goatee has become what looks like the shadow of a tower with a pointed roof, and the shoe had turned into what the printers call a fist, with a finger pointing. If I were now imprisoned on a mountain summit 100 miles northward of this point, and was denied a timepiece, I could get along well enough from 4 till 6 on clear days, for I could keep trace of the time by the changing shapes of these mighty shadows on the Virgin's front, the most stupendous dial I am acquainted with, the oldest clock in the world by a couple of million years. I suppose I should not have noticed the forms of the shadows if I hadn't the habit of hunting for faces in the clouds and in mountain crags, a sort of amusement which is very entertaining even when you don't find any, and brilliantly satisfying when you do. I have searched through several bushels of photographs of the Jungfrau here, but found only one with the face in it, and in this case, it was not strictly recognizable as a face, which was evidence that the picture was taken before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and also evidence that all the photographers have persistently overlooked one of the most fascinating features of the Jungfrau show. I say fascinating, because if you once detect a human face produced on a great plan by unconscious nature, you never get tired of watching it. At first you can't make another person see it at all, but after he has made it out once he can't see anything else afterward. The King of Greece is a man who goes around quietly enough when off duty. One day this summer he was traveling in an ordinary first-class compartment, just in his other suit, the one which he works the realm in when he is at home, and so he was not looking like anybody in particular, but a good deal like everybody in general. By a hearty and healthy German-American got in and opened up a frank and interesting and sympathetic conversation with him, and asked him a couple of thousand questions about himself, which the king answered good-naturedly, but in a more or less indefinite way as to private particulars. Where do you live when you are at home? In Greece. Greece, well now that is just astonishing, born there. No. Do you speak Greek? Yes. Now ain't that strange, I never expected to live to see that. What is your trade? I mean, how do you get your living? What is your line of business? Well, I hardly know how to answer. I am only a kind of foreman on a salary, and the business, well, is a very general kind of business. Yes, I understand, general jobbing, little of everything, anything that there's money in. That's about it, yes. Are you traveling for the house now? Well, partly, but not entirely. Of course I do a stroke of business if it falls in the way. Good, I like that in you, that's me every time, go on. I was only going to say, I am off on my vacation now. Well, that's all right, no harm in that. A man works all the better for a little let-up now and then. Not that I've been used to having it myself, for I haven't. I reckon this is my first. I was born in Germany, and when I was a couple of weeks old shipped for America, and I've been there ever since, and that's 64 years by the watch. I'm an American in principle and a German at heart, and it's the boss combination. Well, how do you get along? As a rule, pretty fair. I've a rather large family. There, that's it, big family, and trying to raise them on a salary. Now, what did you go to do that for? Well, I thought. Of course you did. You were young and confident and thought you could branch out and make things go with a whirl, and here you are, you see. But never mind about that. I'm not trying to discourage you. Dear me, I've been just where you are myself. You've got good grit, there's good stuff in you, I can see that. You got a wrong start, that's the whole trouble. But you hold your grip and we'll see what can be done. Your case ain't half as bad as it might be. You are going to come out all right, I'm bail for that, boys and girls. My family, yes, some of them are boys. And the rest girls, it's just as I expected. But that's all right, and it's better so anyway. What are the boys doing, learning a trade? Well, no, I thought. It's a great mistake. It's the biggest mistake you ever made. You see that in your own case. A man ought always to have a trade to fall back on. Now, I was harness maker at first. Did that prevent me from becoming one of the biggest brewers in America? Oh no, I always had the harness trick to fall back on in rough weather. Now, if you had learned how to make harness, however, it's too late now, too late. But it's no good plan to cry over spilt milk. But as to the boys, you see, what's to become of them if anything happens to you? It has been my idea, to let the eldest one succeed me. Oh come, suppose the firm don't want him. I hadn't thought of that, but… Now look here, you want to get right down to business and stop dreaming. You are capable of immense things, man. You can make a perfect success in life. All you want is somebody to steady you and boost you along on the right road. Do you own anything in the business? No, not exactly. But if I continue to give satisfaction, I suppose I can keep my… Keep your place, yes. Well, don't you depend on anything of the kind. They'll bounce you the minute you get a little old and worked out, they'll do it sure. Can't you manage somehow to get into the firm? That's the great thing, you know. I think it is doubtful, very doubtful. That's bad, yes, and unfair too. Do you suppose that if I should go there and have a talk with your people, look here, do you think you could run a brewery? I have never tried, but I think I could do it after I got a little familiarity with the business. The German was silent for some time. He did a good deal of thinking, and the king waited with curiosity to see what the result was going to be. Finally the German said, My mind's made up, you leave that crowd, you'll never amount to anything there. In these old countries they never give a fellow a show. Yes, you come over to America, come to my place in Rochester, bring the family along. You shall have a show in the business and the foremanship besides. George, you said your name was George. I'll make a man of you, I give you my word. You've never had a chance here, but that's all going to change. By gracious, I'll give you a lift that'll make your hair curl. At the Shrine of St. Wagner. Bayreuth, August 2d, 1891. It was at Nuremberg that we struck the inundation of music-mad strangers that was rolling down upon Bayreuth. It had been long since we had seen such multitudes of excited and struggling people. It took a good half-hour to pack them and pair them into the train, and it was the longest train we have yet seen in Europe. Nuremberg had been witnessing this sort of experience a couple of times a day for about 2 weeks. It gives one an impressive sense of the magnitude of this biennial pilgrimage. For a pilgrimage is what it is. The devotees come from the very ends of the earth to worship their prophet in his own Kaaba, in his own Mecca. If you are living in New York or San Francisco or Chicago or anywhere else in America, and you conclude, by the middle of May, that you would like to attend the Bayreuth Opera 2 months and a half later, you must use the cable and get about it immediately or you will get no seats. And you must cable for lodgings, too. Then if you are lucky you will get seats in the last row and lodgings in the fringe of the town. If you stop to write you will get nothing. There were plenty of people in Nuremberg when we passed through who had come on pilgrimage without first securing seats and lodgings. They had found neither in Bayreuth. They had walked Bayreuth streets a while in sorrow, then had gone to Nuremberg and found neither beds nor standing room, and had walked those quaint streets all night, waiting for the hotels to open and empty their guests into the trains, and so make room for these, their defeated brethren and sisters in the faith. They had endured from 30 to 40 hours, railroading on the continent of Europe, with all which that implies of worry, fatigue, and financial impoverishment. And all they had got, and all they were to get for it was handiness and accuracy in kicking themselves, acquired by practice in the back streets of the two towns when other people were in bed. For back they must go, over that unspeakable journey with their pious mission unfulfilled. These humiliated outcasts had the frowsy and unbrushed and apologetic look of wet cats, and their eyes were glazed with drowsiness, their bodies were adroop from crown to sole, and all kind-hearted people refrained from asking them if they had been to Bayreuth and failed to connect, as knowing they would lie. We reached here Bayreuth about mid-afternoon of a rainy Saturday. We were of the wise, and had secured lodgings and opera seats months in advance. I am not a musical critic, and did not come here to write essays about the operas and deliver judgment upon their merits. The little children of Bayreuth could do that with a finer sympathy and a broader intelligence than I only care to bring 4 or 5 pilgrims to the operas, pilgrims able to appreciate them and enjoy them. What I write about the performance to put in my odd time would be offered to the public as merely a cat's view of a king, and not of didactic value. Next day, which was Sunday, we left for the Opera House, that is to say, the Wagner Temple, a little after the middle of the afternoon. The great building stands all by itself, grand and lonely, on a high ground outside the town. We were warned that if we arrived after 4 o'clock, we should be obliged to pay $2.50 apiece extra by way of fine. We saved that, and it may be remarked here that this is the only opportunity that Europe offers of saving money. There was a big crowd in the grounds about the building, and the ladies' dresses took the sun with fine effect. I do not mean to intimate that the ladies were in full dress, for that was not so. The dresses were pretty, but neither sex was in evening dress. The interior of the building is simple, severely so, but there is no occasion for color and decoration, since the people sit in the dark. The auditorium has the shape of a keystone, with the stage at the narrow end. There is an aisle on each side, but no aisle in the body of the house. Each row of seats extends in an unbroken curve from one side of the house to the other. There are 7 entrance doors on each side of the theater, and 4 at the butt, 18 doors to admit and omit 1650 persons. The number of the particular door by which you are to enter the house or leave it is printed on your ticket, and you can use no door but that one. Thus, crowding and confusion are impossible. Not so many as 100 people use any one door. This is better than having the usual and useless, elaborate fireproof arrangements. It is the model theater of the world. It can be emptied while the second hand of a watch makes its circuit. It would be entirely safe, even if it were built of lucifer matches. If your seat is near the center of a row and you enter late, you must work your way along a rank of about 25 ladies and gentlemen to get to it. Yet this causes no trouble, for everybody stands up until all the seats are full, and the filling is accomplished in a very few minutes. Then all sit down, and you have a solid mass of 1,500 heads, making a steep cellar door slant from the rear of the house down to the stage. All the lights were turned low, so low that the congregation sat in a deep and solemn gloom. The funereal rustling of dresses and the low buzz of conversation began to die swiftly down, and presently not the ghost of a sound was left. This profound and increasingly impressive stillness endured for some time, the best preparation for music, spectacle, or speech conceivable. I should think our show people would have invented or imported that simple and impressive device for securing and solidifying the attention of an audience long ago, instead of which they continue to this day to open a performance against a deadly competition in the form of noise, confusion, and a scattered interest. Finally, out of darkness and distance, and mystery soft rich notes rose upon the stillness, and from his grave the dead magician began to weave his spells about his disciples, and steep their souls in his enchantments. There was something strangely impressive in the fancy, which kept intruding itself, that the composer was conscious in his grave of what was going on here, and that these divine sounds were the clothing of thoughts which were at this moment passing through his brain, and not recognized and familiar ones which had issued from it at some former time. The entire overture, long as it was played to a dark house with the curtain down. It was exquisite, it was delicious. But straightway thereafter, of course, came the singing, and it does seem to me that nothing can make a Wagner opera absolutely perfect and satisfactory to the untutored, but to leave out the vocal parts. I wish I could see a Wagner opera done in pantomime once. Then one would have the lovely orchestration unvexed to listen to and bathe his spirit in, and the bewildering beautiful scenery to intoxicate his eyes with, and the dumb acting couldn't mar these pleasures, because there isn't often anything in the Wagner opera that one would call by such a violent name as acting. As a rule, all you would see would be a couple of silent people, one of them standing still, the other catching flies. Of course, I do not really mean that he would be catching flies. I only mean that the usual operatic gestures, which consist in reaching first one hand out into the air, and then the other, might suggest the sport I speak of if the operator attended strictly to business and uttered no sound. This present opera was Parsifal. Madame Wagner does not permit its representation anywhere but in Bayreuth. The first act of the three occupied 2 hours, and I enjoyed that in spite of the singing. I trust that I know as well as anybody that singing is one of the most entrancing and bewitching and moving and eloquent of all the vehicles invented by man for the conveying of feeling. But it seems to me that the chief virtue in song is melody, air, tune, rhythm, or what you please to call it, and that when this feature is absent, what remains is a picture with the color left out. I was not able to detect in the vocal parts of Parsifal anything that might with confidence be called rhythm or tune or melody. One person performed at a time, and a long time, too, often in a noble, and always in a high-toned voice. But he only pulled out long notes, then some short ones, then another long one, then a sharp, quick, peremptory bark or two, and so on and so on. And when he was done you saw that the information which he had conveyed had not compensated for the disturbance. Not always, but pretty often. If two of them would but put in a duet occasionally and blend the voices. But no, they don't do that. The great master, who knew so well how to make 100 instruments rejoice in unison, and pour out their souls in mingled and melodious tides of delicious sound, deals only in barren solos when he puts in the vocal parts. It may be that he was deep, and only added the singing to his operas for the sake of the contrast it would make with the music. Singing, it does seem the wrong name to apply to it. Strictly described, it is a practicing of difficult and unpleasant intervals, mainly. An ignorant person gets tired of listening to gymnastic intervals in the long run, no matter how pleasant they may be. In Parsifal, there is a hermit named Gurnemance who stands on the stage in one spot and practices by the hour, while first one, and then another character of the cast, endures what he can of it, and then retires to die. During the evening, there was an intermission of 3/4 of an hour after the first act, and 1 hour long after the second. In both instances, the theater was totally emptied. People who had previously engaged tables in the one soul-eating house were able to put in their time very satisfactorily. The other 1,000 went hungry. The opera was concluded at 10 in the evening, or a little later. When we reached home, we had been gone more than 7 hours. 7 hours at $5 a ticket is almost too much for the money. While browsing about the front yard among the crowd between the acts, I encountered 12 or 15 friends from different parts of America, and those of them who were most familiar with Wagner said that Parsifal seldom pleased at first, but that after one had heard it several times, it was almost sure to become a favorite. It seemed impossible, but it was true, for the statement came from people whose word was not to be doubted. And I gathered some further information. On the ground, I found part of a German musical magazine, and in it, a letter written by Ulich 33 years ago, in which he defends the scorned and abused Wagner against people like me, who found fault with the comprehensive absence of what our kind regards as singing. Ulich says Wagner despised Jean Claparode music, and therefore runs, trills, and schnorkel are discarded by him. I don't know what a schnorkel is, but now that I know it has been left out of these operas, I never have missed so much in my life. And Ulich further says that Wagner's song is true, that it is simply emphasized in toned speech. That certainly describes it, in Parsifal and some of the other operas, and if I understand Ulich's elaborate German, he apologizes for the beautiful airs in Tannhäuser. Very well, now that Wagner and I understand each other, perhaps we shall get along better, and I shall stop calling Wagner on the American plan, and thereafter call him Wagner as per German custom, for I feel entirely friendly now. The minute we get reconciled to a person, how willing we are to throw aside little needless punctilios and pronounce his name right. Of course, I came home wondering why people should come from all corners of America to hear these operas, when we have lately had a season or two of them in New York with these same singers in the several parts, and possibly this same orchestra. I resolved to think that out at all hazards. Yesterday they played the only operatic favorite I have ever had, an opera which has always driven me mad with ignorant delight whenever I have heard it, Tannhäuser. I heard it first when I was a youth. I heard it last in the last German season in New York. I was busy yesterday and I did not intend to go, knowing I should have another Tannhäuser opportunity in a few days. But after 5 o'clock, I found myself free and walked out to the opera house and arrived about the beginning of the second act. My opera ticket admitted me to the grounds in front, past the policeman and the chain, and I thought I would take a rest on a bench for an hour and two and wait for the third act. In a moment or so, the first bugles blew, and the multitude began to crumble apart and melt into the theater. I will explain that this bugle call is one of the pretty features here. You see, the theater is empty, and hundreds of the audience are a good way off in the feeding house. The first bugle call is blown about a quarter of an hour before time for the curtain to rise. This company of buglers, in uniform, march out with military step and send out over the landscape a few bars of the theme of the approaching act, piercing the distances with the gracious notes. Then they march to the other entrance and repeat. Presently they do this over again. Yesterday only about 200 people were still left in front of the house when the second call was blown. In another half-minute they would have been in the house. But then a thing happened which delayed them. The only solitary thing in this world which could be relied on with certainty to accomplish this, I suppose. An imperial princess appeared in the balcony above them. They stopped dead in their tracks and began to gaze in a stupor of gratitude and satisfaction. The lady presently saw that she must disappear or the doors would be closed upon these worshippers, so she returned to her box. This daughter-in-law of an emperor was pretty, she had a kind face, she was without airs, she is known to be full of common human sympathies. There are many kinds of princesses, but this kind is the most harmful of all, for wherever they go they reconcile people to monarchy and set back the clock of progress. The valuable princes, the desirable princes, are the czars and their sort. By their mere dumb presence in the world, they cover with derision every argument that can be invented in favor of royalty by the most ingenious casuist. In his time the husband of this princess was valuable. He led a degraded life. He ended it with his own hand in circumstances and surroundings of a hideous sort, and was buried like a god. In the opera house there is a long loft back of the audience, a kind of open gallery in which princes are displayed. It is sacred to them, it is the holy of holies. As soon as the filling of the house is about complete the standing multitude turn and fix their eyes upon the princely layout, and gaze mutely and longingly and adoringly and regretfully like sinners looking into heaven. They become rapt, unconscious, steeped in worship. There is no spectacle anywhere that is more pathetic than this. It is worth crossing many oceans to see. It is somehow not the same gaze that people rivet upon a Victor Hugo, or Niagara, or the bones of the mastodon, or the guillotine of the Revolution, or the Great Pyramid or distant Vesuvius smoking in the sky, or any man long celebrated to you by his genius and achievements, or thing long celebrated to you by the praises of books and pictures. No, that gaze is only the gaze of intense curiosity, interest, wonder, engaged in drinking delicious deep draughts that taste good all the way down and appease and satisfy the thirst of a lifetime. Satisfy it, that is the word. Hugo and the mastodon will still have a degree of intense interest thereafter when encountered, but never anything approaching the ecstasy of that first view. The interest of a prince is different. It may be envy, it may be worship, doubtless it is a mixture of both, and it does not satisfy its thirst with one view, or even noticeably diminish it. Perhaps the essence of the thing is the value which men attach to a valuable something which has come by luck, and not been earned. $1 picked up in the road is more satisfaction to you than the 99 which you had to work for, and money won at faro, or in stocks snuggles into your heart in the same way. A prince picks up grandeur, power, and a permanent holiday and gratis support by a pure accident, the accident of birth, and he stands always before the grieved eye of poverty and obscurity a monumental representative of luck. And then, supremest value of all his is the only high fortune on the earth which is secure. The commercial millionaire may become a beggar. The illustrious statesman can make a vital mistake and be dropped and forgotten. The illustrious general can lose a decisive battle, and with it the consideration of men. But once a prince always a prince. That is to say, an imitation god, and neither hard fortune, nor an infamous character, nor an addled brain, nor the speech of an ass can undeify him. By common consent of all the nations, and all the ages the most valuable thing in this world is the homage of men, whether deserved or undeserved. It follows without doubt or question, then, that the most desirable position possible is that of a prince. And I think it also follows that the so-called usurpations with which history is littered are the most excusable misdemeanors which men have committed. To usurp a usurpation, that is all it amounts to, isn't it? A prince is not to us what he is to a European, of course. We have not been taught to regard him as a god, and so one good look at him is likely to so nearly appease our curiosity as to make him an object of no greater interest the next time. We want a fresh one, but it is not so with the European. I am quite sure of it. The same old one will answer, he never stales. 18 years ago I was in London, and I called at an Englishman's house on a bleak and foggy and dismal December afternoon to visit his wife and married daughter by appointment. I waited half an hour and then they arrived, frozen. They explained that they had been delayed by an unlooked-for circumstance. While passing in the neighborhood of Marlborough House, they saw a crowd gathering, and were told that the Prince of Wales was about to drive out, so they stopped to get a sight of him. They had waited half an hour on the sidewalk, freezing with the crowd, but were disappointed at last. The prince had changed his mind. I said, with a good deal of surprise, "Is it possible that you two have lived in London all your lives and have never seen the Prince of Wales?" Apparently it was their turn to be surprised, for they exclaimed, "What an idea! Why, we have seen him hundreds of times." They had seen him hundreds of times, yet they had waited half an hour in the gloom and the bitter cold, in the midst of a jam of patients from the same asylum, on the chance of seeing him again. It was a stupefying statement, but one is obliged to believe the English, even when they say a thing like that. I fumbled around for a remark and got out this one. "I can't understand it at all. If I had never seen General Grant, I doubt if I would do that even to get a sight of him," with a slight emphasis on the last word. Their blank faces showed that they wondered where the parallel came in. Then they said blankly, "Of course not, he is only a president." It is doubtless a fact that a prince is a permanent interest, an interest not subject to deterioration. The general who was never defeated, the general who never held a council of war, the only general who ever commanded a connected battlefront 1,200 miles long, the smith who welded together the broken parts of a great republic and re-established it where it is quite likely to outlast all the monarchies present and to come, was really a person of no serious consequence to these people. To them, with their training, my general was only a man, after all, while their prince was clearly much more than that. A being of a wholly unsimilar construction and constitution, and being of no more blood and kinship with men than are the serene eternal lights of the firmament, with the poor dull tallow candles of commerce that sputter and die and leave nothing behind but a pinch of ashes and a stink. I saw the last act of Tannhäuser. I sat in the gloom and the deep stillness, waiting. 1 minute, 2 minutes, I do not know exactly how long. Then the soft music of the hidden orchestra began to breathe its rich, long sighs out from under the distant stage, and by the drop curtain parted in the middle and was drawn softly aside, disclosing the twilighted wood and a wayside shrine, with a white-robed girl praying and a man standing near. Presently that noble chorus of men's voices was heard approaching, and from that moment until the closing of the curtain it was music, just music. Music to make one drunk with pleasure, music to make one take scrip and staff and beg his way round the globe to hear it. To such as are intending to come here in the Wagner season next year I wish to say, bring your dinner pail with you. If you do, you will never cease to be thankful. If you do not, you will find it a hard fight to save yourself from famishing in Bayreuth. Bayreuth is merely a large village, and has no very large hotels or eating houses. The principal inns are the Golden Anchor and the Sun. At either of these places you can get an excellent meal. No, I mean you can go there and see other people get it. There is no charge for this. The town is littered with restaurants, but they are small and bad, and they are overdriven with custom. You must secure a table hours beforehand, and often when you arrive you will find somebody occupying it. We have had this experience. We have had a daily scramble for life, and when I say we, I include shoals of people. I have the impression that the only people who do not have to scramble are the veterans, the disciples who have been here before and know the ropes. I think they arrive about a week before the first opera and engage all the tables for the season. My tribe had tried all kinds of places, some outside of the town, a mile or two, and have captured only nibblings and odds and ends, never in any instance a complete and satisfying meal. Digestible? No, the reverse. These odds and ends are going to serve as souvenirs of Bayreuth, and in that regard their value is not to be overestimated. Photographs fade, bric-a-brac gets lost, busts of Wagner get broken, But once you absorb a Bayreuth restaurant meal, it is your possession and your property until the time comes to embalm the rest of you. Some of these pilgrims here become, in effect, cabinets of souvenirs of Bayreuth. It is believed among scientists that you could examine the crop of a dead Bayreuth pilgrim anywhere in the earth and tell where he came from. But I like this ballast. I think a hermitage scrap up at 8 in the evening, when all the famine breeders have been there and laid in their mementos and gone, is the quietest thing you can lay on your kelson except gravel. Thursday, they keep 2 teams of singers in stock for the chief roles, and one of these is composed of the most renowned artists in the world, with Materna and Alvari in the lead. I suppose a double team is necessary. Doubtless, a single team would die of exhaustion in a week, for all the plays last from 4 in the afternoon till 10 at night. Nearly all the labor falls upon the half-dozen head singers, and apparently they are required to furnish all the noise they can for the money. If they feel a soft, whispery, mysterious feeling, they are required to open out and let the public know it. Operas are given only on Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, with 3 days of ostensible rest per week, and 2 teams to do the 4 operas. But the ostensible rest is devoted largely to rehearsing. It is said that the off days are devoted to rehearsing from some time in the morning till 10 at night. Are there 2 orchestras also? It is quite likely, since there are 110 names in the orchestra list. Yesterday the opera was Tristan and Isolde. I have seen all sorts of audiences, at theaters, operas, concerts, lectures, sermons, funerals, but none which was twin to the Wagner audience of Bayreuth for fixed and reverential attention. Absolute attention and petrified retention to the end of an act of the attitude assumed at the beginning of it. You detect no movement in the solid mass of heads and shoulders. You seem to sit with the dead in the gloom of a tomb. You know that they are being stirred to their profoundest depths, that there are times when they want to rise and wave handkerchiefs and shout their approbation, and times when tears are running down their faces, and it would be a relief to free their pent emotions in sobs or screams. Yet you hear not one utterance till the curtain swings together and the closing strains have slowly faded out and died. Then the dead rise with one impulse and shake the building with their applause. Every seat is full in the first act. There is not a vacant one in the last. If a man would be conspicuous, let him come here and retire from the house in the midst of an act. It would make him celebrated. This audience reminds me of nothing I have ever seen, and of nothing I have read about, except the city in the Arabian tale, where all the inhabitants have been turned to brass, and the traveler finds them after centuries mute, motionless, and still retaining the attitudes which they last knew in life. Here the Wagner audience dress as they please, and sit in the dark and worship in silence. At the Metropolitan in New York they sit in a glare, and wear their showiest harness. They hum airs, they squeak fans, they titter, and they gabble all the time. In some of the boxes, the conversation and laughter are so loud as to divide the attention of the house with the stage. In large measure, the Metropolitan is a showcase for rich fashionables who are not trained in Wagnerian music and have no reverence for it, but who like to promote art and show their clothes. Can that be an agreeable atmosphere to persons in whom this music produces a sort of divine ecstasy, and to whom its creator is a very deity, his stage a temple, the works of his brain and hands consecrated things, and the partaking of them with eye and ear a sacred solemnity? Manifestly, no. Then perhaps the temporary expatriation, the tedious traversing of seas and continents, the pilgrimage to Bayreuth stands explained. These devotees would worship in an atmosphere of devotion. It is only here that they can find it without fleck or blemish or any worldly pollution. In this remote village there are no sights to see, there is no newspaper to intrude the worries of the distant world, there is nothing going on, it is always Sunday. The pilgrim wends to his temple out of town, sits out his moving service, returns to his bed with his heart and soul and his body exhausted by long hours of tremendous emotion, and he is in no fit condition to do anything, but to lie torpid and slowly gather back life and strength for the next service. This opera of Tristan and Isolde last night broke the hearts of all witnesses who were of the faith, and I know of some who have heard of many who could not sleep after it, but cried the night away. I feel strongly out of place here. Sometimes I feel like the sane person in a community of the mad. Sometimes I feel like the one blind man where all others see, the one groping savage in the college of the learned, and always, during service, I feel like a heretic in heaven. But by no means do I ever overlook or minify the fact that this is one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. I have never seen anything like this before. I have never seen anything so great and fine and real as this devotion. Friday, yesterday's opera was Parsifal again. The others went and they show marked advance in appreciation, but I went hunting for relics and reminders of the Margravine Wilhelmina, she of the imperishable memoirs. I am properly grateful to her for her unconscious satire upon monarchy and nobility, and therefore nothing which her hand touched or her eye looked upon is indifferent to me. I am her pilgrim, the rest of this multitude here are Wagner's. Tuesday, I have seen my last 2 operas, my season is ended, and we cross over into Bohemia this afternoon. I was supposing that my musical regeneration was accomplished and perfected, because I enjoyed both of these operas, singing and all, and moreover, one of them was Parsifal, but the experts have disenchanted me. They say, "Singing, that wasn't singing. That was the wailing, screeching of third-rate obscurities, palmed off on us in the interest of economy." Well, I ought to have recognized the sign, the old, sure sign that has never failed me in matters of art. Whenever I enjoy anything in art, it means that it is mighty poor. The private knowledge of this fact has saved me from going to pieces with enthusiasm in front of many and many a chromo. However, my base instinct does bring me profit sometimes. I was the only man out of 3,200 who got his money back on those 2 operas. William Dean Howells. Is it true that the sun of a man's mentality touches noon at 40 and then begins to wane toward setting? Dr. Osler is charged with saying so. Maybe he said it, maybe he didn't, I don't know which it is. But if he said it, I can point him to a case which proves his rule, proves it by being an exception to it. To this place I nominate Mr. Howells.